Great. Good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for your time. I appreciate you're all busy at the moment with the end of financial year coming up and all the other challenges, so I'll keep this webinar as brief as possible. For everybody today, I guess is top of mind is the replacement of APRA's D2A. What we want to show you today is a different way to get a low-cost solution that adds real value to your institution. So it's not just about replacing D2A, it's about tackling the growing regulatory impasse that's distracting you from serving your customers and driving your business. And Interrupters is gaining global recognition for reinventing the ways banks manage risk and compliance. And the good news is that we're actually designing it for community banking. We've been on a mission over the last 5 years to empower community banking through technology, not bureaucracy. What does this really mean? Well, working in Societe Generale Bank in Paris, we were dealing with 50,000 risk controls and there were 700 staff on their second line defense risk management. We were working on a project to digitally transform that process, including machine learning. Now, they can absorb this due to their size. Their compliance risk cost is a quarter of the size of a community bank in proportion to operating costs. They can afford the systems, they grab all the skilled people, and community banks don't have the budget or the resources to do something like what Societe Generale Bank's doing. So over the last 5 years, we've been talking to community banks, building societies, and credit unions around the world to try and identify the challenges, the gaps in their decision ecosystems and regulatory reporting. And based on this input, we've built a cloud solution to give community banks an edge. And as Jan was talking about, we've received recognition from the New York-based Automation News and been asked to speak around the world at a number of conferences on regulatory intelligence and decision intelligence. We're also going to be a silver sponsor to the World Credit Union Conference, and we'd like the industry to recognize us not as a vendor, but a community banking partner. So what I highlighted here is probably a number of the problems that we're all facing over the next 12 months. D2A is top of mind, and the key issue is how do we submit returns without D2A? At the point is that APRA is going to require you to create XML files and then transmit them to APRA. So an example, this is the XML file. It's a little bit of a complex screen, but that's the internal data transport that's going to be sent over to APRA. Now, how do you get your Excel data into that format to send to APRA? And that's one of the key challenges that you're facing. On top of that is that your staff have been using D2A to do that last minute manual adjustment. So if they've found something's not quite correct because we've got something was missed in the general ledger or there was a problem in the banking book, and they'll go and adjust it in the D2A. Without D2A, that's no longer possible, and that needs to be fixed at the steps beforehand. And then on top of all of that is all the audit and risk controls around the processes defined in APS 310. And a lot of what we've been built into the system has been from the EYs and KPMGs asking us to implement these audit risk controls to make it easier for them to audit financial institutions. You're also going to have to start working on the changes for ARS 220. Now, over the last couple of years, you'll be hearing the same language from APRA. They're talking more about, we want greater detail, we want deep dive audits. And the challenge is, how do you do this with an environment that's really having summarized data in spreadsheets and pulling data into another summarized spreadsheet or using Tableau or something? You don't have data depth. So this is creating a challenge for you. And then another one, which is really interesting, is that within 5 years, you don't have to worry about submitting returns. The regulators will access your system in real time. Yes, you heard me, the regulators are going to access your banking system. The UK government did a proof of concept in 2019 on digital regulatory reporting, and the whole process is about having a structure within the banking system so that regulators at any point of time can go and get an assessment of what your risk exposures are, what your capital adequacy is, what your liquidity is. So you're seeing this whole change occurring. Now, APRA has flagged this as a direction they want to go, and they've been saying that for a couple of years now. And the same language is coming out of the US regulators as well. So you see this is the change that's occurring and that you have to prepare for. So how are you going to manage all these compliance changes? And most importantly, how can you reduce your risk impost, which is 4 times that of the big banks? So the answer, a robust decision ecosystem. The problem we've got at the moment is that we are receiving so much information, and as human beings, we cannot process all the volumes of data being produced today. You will have reports saying, oh, these are all the risk control issues. You've got all the financial reports. We have some public listed companies who will have board papers that are 1,000 pages long. So we're really having a problem with information overload. And the focus now needs to be moving to decision process. And when you really think about what APRA is doing in the regulatory reporting, is they're really focusing on decisions. So the way we like to draw this up is to think about a GPS. So instead of using maps, you've gone to GPS and the decision experience is so much greater. So instead of you searching for routes in the map book, the GPS gives us directions. It's in real time. It predicts problems. It gives us options. If there's a traffic jam, it suggests a different route. Now, for GPS to work, there's a whole ecosystem in the background you do not see. There are satellites and mapping systems, integration with government traffic systems, and so on. And same with your business. Your decision experience in your business depends on the quality of the ecosystem supporting you. And when we're talking to regulators in the UK or the US or Australia, this is the thing that they are very concerned about is what is the strength of the decision ecosystem in the financial institution? Now, when we talk about that decision ecosystem, it already exists in your organization. So when you were producing the APRA return, whether it's in spreadsheets or other systems, it's an ecosystem. You're all going through the same steps of extracting data from the core banking systems or ERP solutions, etc. You'll have mapping processes to map it to lines in the regulatory return. You'll also have to pull information from Treasury and repricing forecasts to do certain forms in the APRA return. And then at the end of it, you paste it into the D2A. But that ecosystem is not limited just to the return, because most of the information that will be in that main spreadsheet process is then also used in a number of management reports. So it's your capital adequacy calculation that goes in your board papers will be using the same spreadsheet as what you're doing for D2A. You'll use it for scenarios and stress testing and helping to produce the ICAP. It'll go towards the asset liability management and ALCO. So you've got an ecosystem already. The challenge is not whether you've got a system. The question is whether you're having a decision experience of a map book or a GPS. And what we're recognizing at the moment is every year that pressure on that existing ecosystem has grown to a point it's reaching breaking point. So this is why we're talking not just D2A, but to actually think about the decision ecosystem that supports it. Another thing that we're seeing as well that's coming across, and this is going to increase, help you to reduce your costs in your business, is the way that we actually work. So at the moment, the top diagram is a typical environment where we capture information into a data warehouse, and then we have a lot of expensive staff pulling that information out and creating spreadsheets and reports to try and get that to the decision makers. And the problem we've got around that is you've got a whole lot of issues around the cost of doing that. You'll have sensitive data in some of that information. So now you're into data protection and cybersecurity. And a lot of the risk controls in your organizations is to make sure that people have followed the steps to make sure that the end result is correct. The bottom line is what McKinsey has talked about as structured knowledge working. And that's about structuring the data and structuring the workflow that goes to staff that compile the reports. And the advantage of that is that with structure, we can bring in artificial intelligence assistance to really help improve the productivity and the quality of decisions that are made in the organizations. And that makes sure that the information is timely and you get a better decision experience. From this sort of structure, we're able to do things like completing most of the end of financial year processes within 3 working days. It has a really big impact. So this is part of the environment, that the decision ecosystem that you need to be thinking about. Now, what I've just talked about, I'm sure that most people start saying, well, if you're just a small credit union, this is sort of a big bank kind of environment. We don't have the budget, it's complex, too time consuming. But what I really want to try and talk to you about is when you think back to your smartphone. So before the smartphone, you'd have your diaries and calendars and all sorts of things. And that move to the smartphone wasn't that big. It wasn't a big step. And the real reason for that was that you had an ecosystem. You had this integration between your calendars and diary and contacts, and it was very simple. And that's the same thing that we've done with the cloud, is that we're able to make that move very low risk and low cost because we actually provide that ecosystem. And what we've done is the complex stuff in the background so that you don't have to worry about it. So we make it something that's scalable and easy to do for the smallest institution to the largest. The other thing that we're also focusing on is minimizing disruption. You've got a lot of pressures on your plate, and we've got to solve a specific problem in replacing D2A, and we've got a limited time frame with 6 to 9 months before we have to go live with that. So we're allowing create an environment where you can do it in stages. So the pink line that you can see on the screen here could be that we just take your current existing legacy process and create an XML output for it. The purple line is then to start automating the processes so that you can pull the data out of the core banking system and a click of a button have most of the data ready for APRA. And the green line then starts going to full forecasting and budgeting systems and repricing and a whole integrated system. So you can implement it at your leisure. So most of you, I'm sure, have been talking to vendors who are quoting nice big price tags to do what's just report automation. So the question we ask is, what if we provided you a decision ecosystem and solved the APRA Data Connect situation for half the cost of what they want to charge you? The important thing that we really focus on is to create value from that regulatory reporting process. So now I'll take you into a demo so that you can understand what the system is. So we're just trying to step through the areas about what you need to do to get to the point of producing a regulatory report. And then what we'll show is also some of the other components of the decision system so that you get a flavor of the whole environment. So here is what we call Perform in a Box as the product, and it's a cloud-based solution. So on the left, we've got our menu, and what we would do in the first step is that we usually have extract process running on Ultra Data or with Data Action, SAP or Temenos, and that compiles an in-month information that either could be pushed to us by TAS or Data Action, or you have the ability to upload it. And what you would do at the end of the month is go to the end of month process. There'll be just a simple click button to roll over to the next financial period. We have the ability to load files. So we've got a number of different ways of loading files. So it could be loading some of the legacy regulatory data from your spreadsheets. It could be end of month or end of year general ledger data, maybe the delinquency data, and other legacy regulatory data. So we can just step through and pull this information up, select the period that we want, and then we could go and choose the files that we want to upload, etc. So it's a fairly simple way of just uploading the data very quickly. And then when we've done that, we can just click on the items that we want to run, click process, and in the background, we'll pull all that data in, transform that data, and produce it and get the information ready for the regulatory reports. Then at that stage there, what we would normally do is to run a forecast, and this process is to use all the forecast parameters, etc., to work out loan interest revenue or deposit interest expense over the next 3 years for a forecasting process. That may not be what you implement in the first stage. And we've done a lot of work to try and improve the performance of the system. Something that was taking maybe 5 minutes to run is now running in 10 seconds. So a lot of work's gone into building the system and making it very easy to use for customers. So now that we've done all that, within half an hour at the beginning of the month, we can go and start producing reports. So we could actually go in and say, I want to run this balance sheet, 12-month report, select the period, run the report. And straight away, you can see a spreadsheet-like report. We can actually go in and say, I want to run that as a spreadsheet, save that as a spreadsheet, say export. And I can open that up now and you'll see that as a spreadsheet. So we could do it as a spreadsheet or a PDF. And we can run a range of different reports, as an example, maybe an operational risk report. And then the stuff that you're really excited is the regulatory reporting. So select the regulatory items and we can see the different environments. And if you think doing Australian regulatory reporting is fun, we're also doing it for the United States and United Kingdom. So just to give you a bit of a look and feel, this is the United States Regulatory Core Report, which is their version of the D2A system. But I'll just quickly run through it. You can see there's an Australian regulatory report. So what's happening at the moment is we load up the template and then we populate it with the information from the system. So just basically pull the information in, transform it, and straight away we can produce the regulatory reports. So you can see here all the different reports that you can have, all the different reports that's in the APRA return. So once you've gone through and then you've looked at your reports and you checked, yep, that looks correct, we can now go to actually submitting that regulatory report. So you go to export returns, select the report we want. We could select multiple reports, select the period, say test and export. And now we've got the APRA regulatory report. So you can see the example here is that the APRA regulatory report that's just been created. So we can create it either as one form or multiple forms at the time. Now, what we would do is, as you would have seen in the APRA webinar, is that you would take that file and you would just upload it into the new APRA Data Connect. It's fairly that simple. The next stage, and APRA hasn't finalized it, will be something where you could actually, from the system, automatically submit it to APRA, but we won't know about that until maybe around September, October. So that's fairly quickly, you've got to the position of producing a regulatory report. Now, on top of that, we've got capabilities of doing a few other things. So what we've got is the capability to do manual data entry items. So there are some items that might be on the regulatory return that might be off balance sheet. So they might not be in the core banking extract or the general ledger extract. So we have a capability of creating a manual data extract, so you can just populate it with this information and it's available to the auditors as well. The other things we can also do is that we can put forecast data in. So because the information that's used in the regulatory returns are also used in producing the capital adequacy calculations, etc., in your forecast, we are able to do things like adding in the LANA figures as a forecast going forward, so that you can actually have a 3-year forecast of capital adequacy and liquidity. So using the same process that we do the APRA report, we can actually start doing 3-year capital plans and liquidity plans at a click of a button. The other capability that we've got is to actually also do manual data entry of regulatory forms. So what we can do is a situation where there might be these one-off forms, as you see that came up with the stuff that you made to do with COVID. There was some new reports came up, and we could actually create that as very quickly within a day, have that report that you could actually go in into some details and submit that to APRA. So we have this ability of doing a full automated system, but there's always going to be that situation where there might be a new form or something that's manual, and you can actually enter that information manually. Now, the other side that the auditors like is the ability to see how those calculations are calculated. So we have an audit capability in the system so that we can actually go in, let's say, look at housing loan interest. We could go back different periods, click on the period that we want to look at, and we can see how this formula is created. So it's actually saying what made up this line item. Now, at the moment, you have a spreadsheet with all these rules that you have to follow through multiple sheets to try and follow how that data is corrected. We can actually just drill down and see how that information is calculated and what the value is at that point of time. So it's it makes the information far more transparent for both the internal organization and for external auditors. The other environment that you've got is the requirement where you have to do manual adjustments. So again, we can go in, select a period, select the environment, the period, and then replace the original value with an adjusted value. Now, once that's done, that then has to be approved by a supervisor, and this information is available for the external auditors. And one of the things that we get a lot of from EY and KPMG, et cetera, was to say is, look, we need to know what those manual adjustments are, because what's been happening is they've been put into, say, D2A, and we're not seeing records of what those changes are and the reasons why. All these steps through here, every change that's occurring is audited. So what can happen is KPMG comes in, does an audit, and then 2 years later, we can give KPMG a list of all the changes since that last audit. And now they can do a system audit where they only focus on the changes since the previous audit. So it really starts changing a lot of the things that are happening in the organization. So I've taken you very quickly through the producing the APRA returns, and you can see it's fairly seamless, fairly quick, just a matter of a few clicks of buttons, and you've got all the data you require. We then have information around doing things like portfolio forecasts, and there's a whole lot of features that make it easier to run the business. So one of the examples we've got here is a calendar view showing the term deposits maturing on each day going forward. And you can actually go, say, identify a large period of time, click on a button, and actually see which products will be maturing. So just visually trying to help you analyze data. So what we talk about in the system is to try and humanize risk, to try and make it easy to understand and absorb. We have portfolio forecasts, so we can actually select products and actually view the data, so we can actually start doing forecasting of the products. So we can actually go in and into deposit values, what the maturity rate is, what the interest rates are. And it's got a spreadsheet look and feel, so we can actually do things like drag and fill, just like you would do in the spreadsheet. And a lot of capability that we can actually now add in a whole lot of new forms to do things like budgeting for payroll or ATMs or whatever that you want to do in the organization. Now, all that information, when we save it, goes automatically into your profit and loss and balance sheets forecast as well. Just cancel that. Then we also have repricing modules, so we can actually go in and view the repricing. We can actually go in and sort of do drill down, so we could actually go and have a look at, say, the average rates over the next 3 years of forecasts, and actually drill down and look at that information in detail, right down to the tiers. Now we're going to introduce you to Reggie. Now, Reggie is our artificial intelligence assistant. So this is where we're talking about structured knowledge working, structured data flows. Now we can start doing things with artificial intelligence. So if you think about your risk models, doing your repricing, the time it takes to pull that data together, etc., we automatically pull that information from the bank extract and actually build a base repricing module. And then what we can do is to say, Reggie, increase rates by 25 basis points for I3 Tier 4 in October 21. We ask Reggie to do that. Reggie just double confirms to say, is that what you want to do? I'll say yes. And the artificial intelligence assistant will actually go through and model what those rate changes are through. And that what you could actually do is to go through and immediately see that information in a dashboard. So what you can start seeing is this capability of doing a lot more things fairly quickly. And what we can do with that as well is that we can now start using that for stress testing, because what we can use is that repricing model and say, what happens if we have an event where a liquidity event where like the global financial crisis, where we don't think 70% of term deposits will renew in the month. We could ask Reggie to model that and immediately see the impact on the system. So this is where you start seeing this integration. It's not just the D2A, but this is all about your stress testing, etc. Other capabilities that we all have in there is we have a treasury system. So you might be using visual risk, but we have also a treasury system where we can load in those investments and do things like counterparty measures, where we'll take the capital adequacy, the capital that's in the regulatory side, and say, well, you're not allowed to be exposed to more than, say, 2% against each exposure. We can do the parent counterparty exposure, etc. But the main thing that we're doing here is to break up the general ledger details and also to identify the risk-weighted asset components and balance sheet groups to go on your regulatory reporting system. So you can see again this integration between the Treasury system and the APRA system. And it might be a situation that you've got your own Treasury system and we pull that information in from that Treasury system. So just stepping through all those components, the other area that we've got is scenarios. Now, this is really a growing part of the organization, is to do scenarios and stress testing. So what we do is to say, look, I want to create a new scenario and we want to see a property price collapse. See if there's a, so what happens if property values drop 40%? And again, what we can start doing is to use Reggie to start building up a scenario. So what we can start doing is to say, hey, Reggie, drop property values by 40%. Ask Reggie to do that. He says, is this what you want me to do? Say yes, send. And what's happening is now is that we're starting to build a scenario, and we could start adding in, can you increase interest rates by this? Could we do this? Could we do that? And then create a scenario. Now, what you can see up the top here of the screen is that we're in scenario 0, the base scenario. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say switch scenario. And now we're going to go into this new scenario. Say change to scenario. And we can go through and use that scenario. We could actually go and step through to each, look at the reports. We could go into repricing and say, look, I want to create a scenario and try a new product, or I want to go in and say in the Treasury system, we're going to accept this RBA bond, or say in the forecasting that we're going to increase salary costs because of the superannuation increase. So you can try all these different things and go into your report systems and produce reports and your capital and liquidity plans based on that scenario. And then at the end of it, we provide audit capabilities so that you can see information when reports were produced, or what changes occurred and documented through the system. So look, that's just a very quick run through on the system. So I'll go back to also the information that we can do with the scenarios I've got is this ability to actually then say, right, well, I've created different scenarios. So look, I want to see what the impact of the 40% property price and the base scenario. and actually start seeing the impact of those different scenarios on the dashboard. One of the things that we're trying to create, and possibly have already next year, is that you could actually sit in your ALCO meeting and ask Reggie to model an increase in term deposit rates, and then see on the dashboard in the ALCO meeting within minutes what the impact of that price is. So you can start seeing, when we start talking about a decision ecosystem, how this is really changing the way you do business. So I'll come back to the presentation. This is more the technical stuff, but what we really want to say is that we spent a lot of money building a very robust, scalable, and secure system. We've got disaster and recovery where the information is backed up into another region. We encrypt the data, we encrypt the communications, do a lot around cybersecurity. Each of your accounts is isolated from other banks, so you're not sharing the same databases. It's designed to scale to thousands of credit unions and community banks. And what we're doing, just on the right-hand side, what you'll see is that we're building capabilities down the track to start doing building up data lakes for machine learning and cognitive investigation, so that we can actually start taking information that we've been capturing from different credit unions and start aggregating it so we can provide data services back. And I think the best example of that is with IFRS 9, whereas small financial institutions, you do not have a lot of data, historical data to do IFRS 9 predictions. But if we compile the information from multiple organizations, we could start providing an industry-wide detail. So this is just some of the examples of what the capabilities are, and then also to integrate into Microsoft Office 365, so that we have capabilities that when we need to make a change, then we could go into Planner and Teams and say that these are requirements to be done, or integrate into Power BI and start using robotics in Microsoft Flow. So it gives you a bit of an idea. This is not just a simple system. This is a sophisticated enterprise system at a low cost. So I'm sure there will be questions, how long does it take to implement it? What we've tried to do is to build a solution that's out of the box. So it's a little bit like Xero. This is what you get. Love it or hate it, but it makes it lower cost to implement it. We can do a little bit of customization around reports and that, but trying to keep a very basic system, low cost, easy to implement. The areas around is implementing a data extract process. So say put it onto the Ultra Data server to produce an output, and then Taz would say transmit that to the cloud server, ready for you to run. So setting all that up. There will be a process of mapping to say, look, these GLs make up this line item on the APRA return, setting up the structures and users in the system, and then an area of reconciling and testing. So kind of basically maybe about 4 to 5 weeks to implement it. The big area is going to be preparing for Data Connect, and that's going to probably take another couple of months to go through those processes and start making sure we've got all the data. APRA hasn't finalized the forms. We assume they're going to be fairly similar to what's on D2A, but we've got to go through those testing processes and make sure all the final processes are all running when APRA releases that data. And then also the testing processes. So that's just basically where we are at. What we're offering for the attendees as conferences for this webinar is a 20% discount if you're able to join a working group and sign up before the end of July. What that does is it helps us, it helps you because you can share resources and work together to reach this, to help get to that APRA cutoff. But it also helps us to organize our resources as well. We've been working quite a bit with Southwest Credit, and David Brown and Ravi are both very keen to talk to you, and if you want to get references. We've got four institutions that we're working, loading up on the new cloud solution at the moment. If you want some more information, you can contact at info@interrupters.com or phone the number. we will try and contact with you in the near future. So that was just a quick rundown of the system. I hope that's useful, and quite happy to answer any questions after the session as well. So I think at the moment, Jan, do we want to go through some of the questions that have been asked?
Yes, David, thanks very much. I've got a question from Serena. I'll just read it to you. David, Jordan's overview is very good, but we have a couple of queries. Which systems can interrupters work with in Australia to extract the XML files and be able to unleash all your capabilities?
So at the moment, what we're doing is we've had the extracts with both from Data Action and Ultra Data Systems. We're also doing with SAP and with Temenos. But really what we're doing is to use the information that you can extract. So at the end of the day, you will be producing a lot of this, extracting a lot of this information for your manual systems, and we can use that same information and upload it into our own system. So what we're working through at the moment is building up environment for about 20 core banking systems around the world. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think so. So Serena, I think it means basically almost anything. Yes, Serena says thanks. Okay, and Serena had a question about security, but I think you answered it during the session about the secure cloud.
Yes, so look, what we're doing and data protection is a real big issue. There's a whole lot of steps that we're involved in trying to do. Is, you know, we don't really need to know what the customer number is. What we need to know is the relationships. So if you have a member number and an account number on the system, what we do is to actually encrypt that data so that if somebody did hack the system, which is unlikely, they wouldn't have any useful data to do anything. What we also try and do is, in line with the data protection, is to use the minimal amount of information to do what needs to be done. So we don't need to know the date of birth. We might only want to know the age group, or we don't need to know their address, but we would like to know the postcode so that we can sort of group people in regions. So a lot of that works around to reduce the security. We have a separation between the cloud access and the backend services, where that it can only be reached through the programs. And we also, with Microsoft Azure, have a whole range of security processes in place that Microsoft steps in, and then we monitor them to make sure that there's no access from hacking, etc. And this is the environment, a similar environment that TAS is starting to move credit unions to as well.
Another question we had from Dave, and I think it probably applies to everybody. We are recording this, and we will be sending out a recording link. So if you have other staff or management that you want to see this, you're welcome to share it with them. Those are the questions we have, David. Any other questions? Welcome to ask. Okay, I think that's it. We've had a really great turnout. We will, as I said, we will be sharing a replay of this webinar. If you want to share it with some of your staff and management, you're welcome to. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Great, thank you very much for your time, and anytime just send some questions, we're happy to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Bye.